Thank you, Ryan. What a fun way to start my talk, throwing teachers. Sometimes our lives seem to be determined by a series of interrogations. When I was a child, the question that was asked to me and that I thought was going to define my purpose in life was that persistent question that your parents ask you: what do you want to be when you grow up? Once I moved away from the illusion that my sense of self was going to be determined by a question I answered early in life, another question became prevalent. This time, I knew who I was. I have grown. I knew what I wanted to be, but I have to basically think about my identity in the context of a foreign country, where I suddenly became a stranger. That other who is the constant subject of interrogation. In meeting people, after perceiving in me some mannerism, some look, and an accent, the question was to be expected. Where are you from? That question brings me always to a halt, for I have to dig very deep into the memory. I have to take a swift journey into the past to recover those places that can claim me as one who rightfully belong. Yet there's a stage in life where that strangeness ceases to matter. For you are considered to have achieved what anthropologists will call the status of clan membership, due to your role as a leader of a social group or community. As a leader, the question that weighs on your mind is that which sets expectations for your abilities to know something about the future. And what is your vision? That's the question I hear every single day. People see themselves as wanderers in the wilderness. And those who follow seem to see you as that person with particular sensibilities to point the direction to the promised land. So the question of vision is not really a question about your ability to articulate lofty goals and lay out a plan to achieve them. It is, in essence, a profound existential question. As a leader, where do you see hope in a world where the present is troublesome and the future seems uncertain? When you are asked to lay out a vision, you are positioned as that individual with a special charisma to open a horizon of credible possibilities. And by opening that horizon, calming down collective anxieties. And I want to stress my choice of words. Credible possibilities. For utopian possibilities, while they are highly inspirational, are hard to come to realization. And those who follow end up either living in disbelief as radical cynics or just waiting for unrealistic outcomes as radical optimists. And neither cynics nor optimists make good visionaries. They are comfortable with the world as is, and they lack the necessary motivation to move forward towards a world that can be. I have learned with time to approach the question of visioning not from the prompt of that question, what is your vision? But from a more basic enigma. What makes a vision? What turns an idea, a desire, a thought into that which we call a vision? Why is that we use the metaphor of vision when the object of reflection is the future? There is no vision of the past. The best that we can do is recall it. There is no vision of the present, just pure awareness. But the future, that which is not within the reach of our comprehension, seems to be accessible by the invisible power of something we have decided to call a vision. Few authors writing about the visioning process define what a vision is. Where do we find it? Or if what we are construing as a vision is properly so, and not just a mechanical recitation of social trends in need of some fine-tuning. Bluntly stated, we are searching for something that we know how to name, but that we are unable to clearly see. We don't know how it looks like. Therefore, I would say that seeking a vision may be one of the endeavors we face blindly. And that is a great paradox. I have to say that in seeking a vision, I have to try to find a way to compare it with its biological referent, the human eye. Those of you who know something about the history of the eye and the anatomy of that vital organ know very well about the tradition of connecting the eye to the phenomenon of light. When asked about a vision, we can use the analogy and say that as the eye seeks light for its functioning, hope or vision is hope illuminating spaces for the flourishing of life in the darkest of time. But that is where the analogy ends. For our eye is limited when it comes to piercing the present, the world as is, to perceive the world as it can be. Only an insight of the soul can go that far. And the insight of the soul have to be understood only if it's in alignment with that which lives in relationship with that soul, the divine self. Only a vision that has God as its source can help us penetrate that dense wall that separates the present from the future and allow us to see some rays of luminosity through the fractures. Only a divinely infused vision can allow us to see a world that we can vividly imagine. For if we cannot imagine another possible world, we have surrendered to any discourse of hope, to the point that speaking about hope in today's cultural and social environment may be one of the most irrelevant conversations that we can sustain as people of faith. So the task of the visionary leader then may be to rescue hope from the threats of extinction. And that can happen if we begin to recognize that the reality that our eyes can see differs significantly from the scope of God's vision. I have found some ways in which relying on the analogy of the eye deter me from seeking God's vision. The first one is associating vision with an outmoded theory of the eye. There was a time in history when the eye was conceived to be this extensive organ, which its own internal light, and that light was able to reach out and grasp objects and bring them back to memory to produce images. And although that understanding has been corrected by modern science, when we talk about a vision for hope, we continue to believe that we can reach out into the future and bring something to the present that is worth considering. That the visionary leader is the one that goes ahead of us beyond the present and can come back with great solutions for our more pressing problems of the day. There is another way in which I have to shed away the hegemony of the eye in understanding God's vision. Our eyes are in love with light. Medieval theologians were inspired by the poetry of John's Gospel, where God is light. And since then, the metaphysics of life has informed our understanding of the divine to the point that we continue to extract meaning of that metaphor in our prayers, our hymns, and our liturgies. We continue to believe that we can extend ourselves into the future. And that effort may be visionless, for it does not consider the ability of the soul to build hope, not only with the intangible traces of a possible future, but also with concrete memories of the past and with a profound consciousness of our present. In other words, while our ocular understanding of vision pushes us to see hope only in the future, God's vision, not bound by our concepts of time, asserts that we can find vision in coming to terms with our past and in responding in concrete ways to our present. I think that sometimes we don't want to seek God's vision because it requires an uncomfortable wrestling with our past and the ways that we and our ancestors have contributed to build this world that we are trying so impatiently to change. Seeking God's vision brings a deep awareness that we have fell short in doing things today that will make whatever future we envision possible. Visioning can be painful. Our eyes are in love with light. Look at this, a theater. And the lights are flooding on the stage, focusing your attention to this proscenium where somebody is saying something that may be important. Sometimes those lights are so intense that everyone who's sitting around you disappears from your eyesight. You cannot contemplate the aesthetics of the space, or even consider that there are other stories worth listening to than the one captured by your eye and mediated by light. We live in a theatrical society. We follow the lights, rarely asking ourselves who is guiding the spotlight, and just believing or assuming that where the light falls is the most important place we have to pay attention to. God's vision wants to move us from a theatrical society to a convivial society, where we understand or come to an understanding that the future is not only of our doing, that we are all part and participants of the present darkness, and that hope is a collective construction of possibilities where every story, every experience, and every desire counts. I am not one to say that I have gained the clarity of God's vision. But I grow every day more confident that if that is something I want to attain, I have to hold tight to two important premises. The first one, I have to divert my eyes from things that are completely certain and clear. For no one who sees the world as is and accepts the world as is can be a reliable herald of hope. The embers of hope are not to be found in the radiance of a Pollyannic future, but perhaps in the shadows, in the flickers of life among those who live in the margin, people who also have a dream for the future, and believe me, who are already living in alternative worlds different than ours. I think that our eyes are said to be the windows to the world. And at times we have to chop them to the vitriol and all the upheaval around us so that we can attend to the interiority of our soul. As our eyes know well how to do when we pray, or when we are trying to remember and recall something to memory, or when we experience a strong feeling of pain, or even pleasure. The lessons of this reflection cannot be simpler. Open your eyes wide open. For hope may be found in the shadows of a world where, against any official narrative, there are people who do live joyfully in simplicity. Places where there are people who continue to nurture a caring and loving relationship with nature. Places where people have abolished the concept of I from their language because their identity is solely a we of mutual accountability. Places where people do not have a social media presence to complain about the world every morning while sipping their morning latte, but where people stand up and come together and effect change when the chips are down. That's where we can find hope. And while paying attention to the shadows of the present, let's not forget that the soul, the mirror where we can see some of God's reflection in us, it is the place where that present coexists with the past and with the future. And it is in that space of interiority where a vision lies. So perhaps, in order for us to seek a vision, we may simply need to close our eyes. Thank you.